You make $13 an hour watching 11 screens in a room that smells like burnt coffee and floor wax. It is 2:40 in the morning. A man in a delivery jacket is using the ATM in the lobby, and you watch him on camera for the way you are paid to watch everyone, which is to say, barely. He takes his $80 and leaves. The machine charges him $3.50 for the privilege. You know this because the machine is yours. Not the bank's, not the building's, yours. It cleared $640 last month, which is more than you will make this entire weekend shift, and nobody in this building knows, and you have arranged carefully for it to stay that way. It starts 4 years earlier with a vending machine story you overheard and didn't believe. You were 26, working the same desk, same screens, and a maintenance guy named Alvaro used to stop by on his rounds because yours was the only lit room on the floor at 3 in the morning. Alvaro was 50-something, quiet, drove a truck with a toolbox welded into the bed. One night he mentioned, in the same tone he used for weather, that the snack machine in the parking garage was his. You laughed. He didn't. He said he had 9 of them around the city, that they made him about $2,000 a month altogether, and that the trick wasn't the machines. The trick was the locations, and locations were just relationships, and relationships were just showing up sober and on time for enough years in a row. Then he finished his coffee and went to go fix a door. You couldn't afford a vending route, but you kept thinking about the shape of the idea, a metal box in a hallway, working every hour you weren't. And then, one night, the armored car crew came to service the lobby ATM, and you signed their access log, and you asked the driver, mostly to stay awake, who actually owned these things. He said the banks own the branded ones. The rest, gas stations, corner stores, lobbies like this one, mostly belong to guys you've never heard of, independent operators. He said the machine you were both standing next to probably cost $2,000 used, and the owner took a cut of every fee. You went home when the sun came up and did not sleep. You sat at your kitchen table with a notebook and did arithmetic with numbers small enough to be embarrassing and real enough to matter. A used machine, around $2,000. A fee of $250 to $350 per withdrawal. If a machine did just 6 withdrawals a day, that was $500 to $600 a month in fees, and the math kept refusing to be wrong no matter how many times you did it with worse assumptions. You had $3,100 saved. It had taken you 2 years to save it, 11 months of that specifically after you moved into the studio apartment above the muffler shop where rent was $610 and the floor hummed from 8 to 5. You spent $1,900 on a refurbished machine from a liquidation listing, again mega, scuffed on one side, and it sat in your living room for 5 weeks like a refrigerator you couldn't explain, because buying the machine turned out to be the easy part. Nobody wants to give wall space to a 27-year-old security guard with one scuffed machine and no track record. 11 business owners told you no. A diner, 2 laundromats, a barber shop, a check cashing place that already had 2 machines, a bowling alley where the manager just said no while you were still mid-sentence. Rejection number 12 was different only because you had stopped expecting anything else, which apparently is a smell dogs and small business owners can both detect. It was a 24-hour taqueria on the east side. The owner, a woman named Marisol, listened to the whole pitch with her arms crossed and said, "What's my cut?" You said 50 cents per withdrawal. She said 75, and you get the corner by the door, and if it breaks and one of my customers loses money, I will unplug it and it will be gone when you come back. You shook on it and had to keep yourself from grinning until you were around the corner. The machine did 4 withdrawals its first day. You know, because you drove past on your way to work and checked the transaction portal in the parking lot on your phone, and you kept checking it that whole first month the way other people check a fantasy football score. First full month, 161 withdrawals. Your cut after Marisol's 75 cents came to $402. You stood in the security office at 3 in the morning looking at that number on your phone, and you understood, in a way no podcast had ever managed to make you understand, the difference between money you chase and money that arrives. $402 was not life-changing. It was direction-changing. You had found a small crack in the way the world normally works, where a person trades hours for dollars at a fixed rate forever, and you intended, politely and quietly, to widen it. Cash management almost killed the whole thing in month 3, and nobody warned you about this part. An ATM does not create money. It vends your money, and you get it back days later when the network settles, which means a machine doing well is a machine that constantly needs feeding, and the feeding comes from your checking account, which had, at its worst point that spring, $214 in it, while $1,100 of yours sat inside a metal box in a taqueria. You learned the term cash float from a forum post at 4 in the morning, sitting at the security desk, and you learned the discipline that came with it. A separate account only for machine cash. A refill schedule tied to settlement days, not to panic. A rule: never let the float account drop below one full refill. It was the first system you ever built, and it was ugly, and it worked, and every system you have built since is that one wearing better clothes. The second machine went into a laundromat, one of the two that had originally told you no. The owner, an older man named Deshaun, called you back 8 months later because the company running his machine took 60% of the fees and hadn't fixed a receipt jam in 3 weeks. You offered him $1 per withdrawal, fixed jams within a day since you drove past the place anyway, and put it in writing on one page. One page mattered to Deshaun. He'd been handed a 19-page contract by the last company and never read it, and it had cost him. The third machine went into a bar whose owner Marisol introduced you to, and that was the day you understood what Alvaro had meant about relationships. Marisol had told him the machine guy shows up when he says he will. 6 words. That sentence was worth more than any flyer you ever printed, and you had printed some genuinely terrible flyers. By 30, you had 6 machines, and the route made between $2,900 and $3,400 a month after location cuts, and you still guarded the same building for what was now $14 an hour, and everyone you worked with assumed you were saving for a truck. The paperwork grew up before the money did. An accountant named Ruth, who worked out of a converted garage and charged you $300 to set up an LLC, told you 2 things that stuck. First, the machines go in the company's name, not yours. Because if a machine gets robbed and somebody gets hurt next to it and decides to sue, they sue the company. And the company owns 6 metal boxes and a used Corolla's worth of cash float, and that is all they can ever touch. Second, she said, keep working the desk job for now, not for the money, for the health insurance, and for the way banks look at a person with a W-2 when it comes time to borrow. You didn't love hearing it. You wrote both things down anyway, and both turned out to be right. The bad year was the year the gas station chain called. 9 locations, 1 contract, a regional manager named Kirk who wore a lanyard like it was a rank. It would have more than doubled the route in one signature, and you wanted it so badly you ignored the arithmetic whispering at you the whole drive home. Kirk wanted $1.50 per withdrawal, plus a monthly placement fee per store, plus you'd eat all vandalism costs, and his stores were open around the clock in neighborhoods where machines got pried at. You did the math 11 times looking for the version where it worked, and the honest answer was that the route would grow by 9 machines and shrink by $400 a month. You called Kirk and said no, and he said, "You'll never get another shot at scale," and hung up. 6 months later, the operator who said yes to those terms listed his entire route for sale on the same liquidation site where you'd bought your first machine. You did not feel triumphant exactly. You felt the way you feel when a car runs the light you almost ran. Growth after that was boring on purpose. 1 machine at a time, each one paid for in full out of the route's own earnings, each location a referral from an existing one. Machine 9 with the lobby of the building you guard, which took the longest negotiation of your life, not over money, but because you asked the property manager to keep your name out of it. The contract lists your LLC, Quiet Corner Services, and the property manager. A woman named Dana thinks the name is a coincidence when she thinks about it at all. There was one truly bad night in all of it. Machine 5, the bar location, got pried open with a crowbar at 4 in the morning on a Sunday. The thief got $960 and destroyed a $4,000 machine getting it, Machine 5 being one of only 2 you'd bought new. Ruth's structure held, the insurance covered $2,800 after the deductible, the bar owner apologized like it was his fault, and you replaced it with a used unit and bolted it into the concrete this time. You had built the whole thing assuming a night like that would eventually come, and when it came, it took a machine and could not reach anything else. Somewhere in year 5, the route crossed $6,000 a month, and your paycheck from the guard job was $2,100 after taxes, and you noticed you had stopped thinking of the paycheck as income. It had become a costume. It explained your existence to everyone who needed your existence, explained your coworkers, your landlord, your mother, who worries, and it came with health insurance, and it gave you 8 quiet paid hours a night to do root paperwork on your laptop between camera sweeps. Your supervisor, Gary, 22 years on the job, tells you at least once a month that you're smart and should get your certification and move up to site supervisor, which pays $19.50 an hour. Every time you tell him you'll look into it. Every time you feel the specific vertigo of being offered with complete sincerity a future you have already quietly outgrown by a man you genuinely like. Your sister figured it out, partway, by accident. She borrowed your car and found a coin-counting receipt in the door pocket for $2,100 in quarters and asked, laughing, if you'd robbed an arcade, and something in your face made her stop laughing. You told her most of it. Not the total. She was quiet for a second, and then she asked the question everyone eventually asks, not how does it work, but why are you still at the desk job? And you gave her the honest answer, which is that the desk job is the best security system the route has. Nobody audits a security guard's lifestyle. Nobody asks the man making $14 an hour to invest in their brother-in-law's restaurant. The job is camouflage, and it is load-bearing, and you will leave it on your own schedule, not the moment the money technically allows it, because the moment the money technically allows it is exactly when people start doing expensive things to feel the way they think the money should make them feel. People who find out about the route, the few who ever have, always ask the same wrong question, which is where the money comes from, as if there were a trick. There is no trick. There is a fee, and the fee has anatomy, and you know it the way Alvaro knew doors. When a stranger pulls $60 out of one of your machines, the $3 surcharge splits 3 ways. The location gets its cut, Marisol 75 cents, Deshawn's $1, whatever the page says, paid monthly, in person when you can, because handing a person an envelope they can feel is worth 4 percentage points of loyalty a year minimum. The processor and the networks take their slice for moving the money. What remains, roughly $1.60 to $2 and change depending on the deal, is yours, and on top of it sits a smaller, stranger stream, most people never hear about, called interchange. A little rebate. The system pays the machine's owner on every transaction, 30-40 cents for existing. Pennies, technically. Except pennies at scale are the entire genre you work in. 19 machines doing their quiet average means around 4,000 transactions a month, and every one of them drops its pennies without being asked, and the pennies alone now out-earn the surcharge total from your first year. Then there is the cash itself, the float, $11,000 to $14,000 of your own money living inside metal boxes around the city at any given hour. And the discipline is understanding that the float is not income and never will be. It is inventory. It is the shelf stock of a store that sells its customers their own money, and it has to turn over clean, counted, and reconciled to the penny every single week, because a machine that's $40 off is not $40 off, it is a hole in the boat you haven't found yet. Ruth taught you the last piece, the paper anatomy. The machines depreciate on a schedule, the mileage on the route car deducts, the LLC files its own return, and the honest, boring result is that a route throwing off $11,000 a month keeps meaningfully more of it than a paycheck of the same size ever could, legally, in the open, using rules written in plain sight that nobody at the security desk had ever once mentioned to you, because nobody at the security desk had ever been told. That is the actual secret if there is one. Not a trick, a vocabulary. Surcharge, interchange, float, depreciation. 4 words your coworkers never learned, doing quiet arithmetic in the dark every night whether anyone says them out loud or not. You left in October, year 6, 3 months after the route crossed $8,200 a month across 14 machines, and 2 months after Ruth confirmed the number you'd privately set as the line, 12 months of all expenses, personal and business, in the float account untouched. You gave Gary 3 weeks' notice instead of 2 because the schedule was thin. He asked what the new gig was, and you said, self-employed, doing service work on cash machines, which was true down to the last word and vaporized his curiosity on contact, exactly as designed. Your last shift ended at 6 in the morning. You bought a breakfast sandwich, sat in your car in the empty lot, and watched the sun come up over a building you had watched 4,000 nights from the inside of, and you felt less like a man being released and more like a satellite easing out of an orbit it had needed for exactly as long as it needed it. You found Alvaro again last spring, which took some doing, because men like Alvaro do not exactly maintain an online presence. He'd retired to a little place 2 counties over, and you drove out on a Tuesday with a box of the good coffee and sat on his porch, and it took him a minute to play Shu, the kid from the lit room on the 3rd floor, and when he did, he laughed the way you remembered, once, quietly, like spending more than one laugh at a time cost extra. You told him about the route. All of it, the 19 machines, Marisol, the crowbar night, the numbers, and he listened the way he used to listen to a door that wouldn't close, right, tilted, patient, diagnostic. And when you finished, when you thanked him, when you told him the whole thing had started with his 9 snack machines and his sentence about relationships, he shook his head slowly and corrected you, because of course he did. It wasn't the sentence, he said. 20 guys heard me say that kind of thing over the years. It was that you were still awake. Everybody else was sleepwalking through the night shift waiting for it to end. You were the only one taking notes at 3 in the morning like the shift was a class. He sold his route when his knees quit. 11 machines by the end, to a young woman who details cars at 2 locations he serviced, carried the financing himself, gets a check on the 1st of every month. Alvaro, it turns out, ended up in the paper business too. Everyone good at this eventually does. You sit on that porch a while longer, 2 owners of invisible things, drinking coffee neither of you has to rush, and driving home you keep catching yourself, checking the clock out of old habit, calculating shift start, and letting it go every time, like releasing a fish. Some men leave you a business, the good ones leave you a diagnostic, stay awake in the rooms everyone else sleeps through. That was the whole inheritance, and it was enough. It is 2:40 in the morning again, some ordinary Tuesday now, and you are asleep, which is the whole point. The machines are not. The one in Marisol's taqueria, the original, scuffed side against the wall, is doing its 4th withdrawal of the night. Marisol's daughter runs the register these days. Deshaun retired, and his nephew kept the contract on the strength of the same one page. The route runs 19 machines now, and cleared $11,400 last month. And the float account Ruth made you build holds more than your old job paid in 3 years, and not one of the 19 locations has your name on a single piece of paper taped to a single wall. Tomorrow you will drive the route, refill 4 machines, tighten 1 bracket, and be home by 2. Nobody claps for any of this. There is no video of it. There is just a spreadsheet with boring tabs, a phone that mostly doesn't ring, and a specific private feeling. The one you first felt at a security desk at 3 in the morning looking at $402 of a number that grows while you are looking somewhere else. You guard your own building now. It has always been an inside job.